welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I'm with DisclosureProject.org and the OrionProject.org, and I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to give you updates on our projects and what is happening. And I'm joined today by Linda Willitts, who has worked with us for many years going on these expeditions all over the world where we have set up contact protocols to contact interstellar civilizations and the kind of experiences we've had in higher states of consciousness as well as with contact. And she'll be helping us discuss what just happened a few weeks ago while we were up in Mount Shasta, California for a week with a group of about 40 people in the Mount Shasta area, where we had some really beautiful and amazing contacts happen and got some really stunning photographs and images of extraterrestrial intelligence and vehicles. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
So this is a tradition, of course, that we go every year to Mount Shasta. Have been going there since 1999, and if you go to DisclosureProject.org, you can see there's a book called Contact Countdown to Transformation, which has come out in the last year, that chronicles these experiences not only at Mount Shasta but all over the world. And Mount Shasta is one of the most amazing places. This is an area where, when we were there in 1999, we had a massive triangular aircraft, spacecraft that came over that was actually out in space that we filmed, and that was so large that it was seen from Vancouver all the way down to L.A., and it came over and turned on its axis right over us and then signaled to us as we signaled to it with a very bright laser. And it sounds like something out of a Steven Spielberg movie, but that's the sort of things that have been happening on these expeditions. And for those of you who are new, of course, we have assessed this issue for many years, for about 20 years now, and CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, was founded in 1990, and its prime purpose is to set up diplomatic protocols to contact these interstellar civilizations who we know are involved with Earth and are concerned about humanity's future and are obviously here. Over two-thirds of the public now accept the fact that what people call UFOs are real, and we have, of course, set up the DisclosureProject.org so that people can see the evidence of over 100 top-secret military and corporate and intelligence community witnesses to this. And we really kind of branded the whole concept of disclosure back in 2001. So at this point, what our central focus is to then move to the next level where we get more and more people to understand that they can make contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations. But in order to do that, they have to understand what are the sciences, both in consciousness and physical sciences, that are needed and that must be understood in order to make contact. And this is really important because I think that most people think that, well, you're just going to go out there and wave a light in the sky or just wait for something to happen passively, when in reality it's a very active process, and the active process is part of what we do these training expeditions for. We're actually going to be doing one at Joshua Tree National Park again this November, and it's open to the public for those of you who would like to come. It's November 7th through the 13th, and we're going to be in Joshua Tree National Park where, as some of you may recall from a previous show, we had an actual extraterrestrial biological entity that was transdimensionally projected onto site that we were able to photograph a few feet from our circle out in the desert. And that information is at cseti.org. So there's a lot happening, and I think that perhaps one of the things I want to mention about what happened at Mount Shasta this year, and I think Linda will agree this was, well, it wasn't per se extraterrestrial, it was a beautiful sort of opening to the possibilities of what was going to occur. The first afternoon we gathered as a group, we were sitting outside, and in the Vedic tradition, since we're on the World Puja Network, I'll talk about the Vedas, we like to sit outside if we can, if the weather cooperates, and it did at Mount Shasta this year. And we were sitting in circle with the group, starting our group process, and it was daytime, and this beautiful bald eagle came over, spiraling, circling over, and crying the beautiful cry that the bald eagle makes. And then it joined up with a very large red hawk.
Red-shouldered hawk.
Yeah, it was a red-shouldered hawk, and the two of them were going around counterclockwise, almost like a Merkaba or a vortex energy, like you would have in an electromagnetic field that would create an anti-gravity effect. And these stayed together, going around like this counterclockwise for some time. And we all thought, well, this was a very beautiful sort of start to the week, that the nature devas and the energies of the earth and of Gaia were cooperating to have this beautiful display. And it was literally right overhead of the group, and it wasn't way far in the distance. It was quite a remarkable natural event that I think presaged the kind of events that happened all week long.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and it was a wonderful start to our week there.
So actually, the very first night we arrived, before the whole group did, I have to say we were renting a house there in Mount Shasta that had a beautiful view of Mount Shasta and and Black Butte and what's called Shastina, which is a small mountain adjacent to Mount Shasta. And the very first evening we were out there, there was a brilliant object that came right into the field near the house that was almost like a starburst of light that came in, and we knew that these were the ETs coming through transdimensional space-time. It was very visible with the naked eye, and this happened as soon as we arrived in Mount Shasta. So there's no question that these civilizations know when people are going to do this with the right intention of universal peace and also higher states of consciousness to make contact for peaceful purposes. And this is very much needed. And one of the things I point out to folks is that there's no open diplomatic program at the UN or the State Department working to make contact with these visitors. And they're not just visitors. They're really, many of these civilizations have been involved with the Earth for millions of years. And we know the ones that are in the Mount Shasta area predate a modern civilization, and if not modern recorded human history. And there is an ancient connection between life on Earth and these interstellar civilizations. And these interstellar civilizations have technologies that allow them to move not only faster than the speed of light, but across dimensions. And one of the dimensions they move through is in the dimension of consciousness and thought. And so one of the key things that people have to begin to understand, which is one of the chief things that we teach at these week-long expeditions, like we're going to be doing in November in Joshua Tree, is the meditation techniques. And we actually do a puja and do meditation instruction so that people understand that the state of consciousness that's required to properly remote view deep space, to make contact with these civilizations, is all already known, but there's a technique to it. There's a technique of meditation, there's a technique for the remote viewing, and most importantly, there's a state of mind to be in, which is a very, not only peaceful state of mind, but one that has an express purpose of opening contact with these civilizations for the purpose of creating a transformed planet on Earth so that we join up in the future with these other interstellar civilizations who are waiting for us to move past the period of open warfare and organized murder, as it's called, into a period of peace where we can be welcomed in an interstellar family of intelligent beings. And they've been waiting for this for many, many millennia, and we know that the time is approaching quickly where this is going to be a known reality. And I think that so many people gathering in this state of consciousness, making contact in a state of mind where, again, it's sort of Rupert Sheldrake's concept of a morphogenic field, is that when people are in this state of mind together, as opposed to singularly by themselves, it creates, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and it creates a huge effect within the realm of the conscious universe. And the extraterrestrial civilizations have never failed to appear when we're doing this with this correct purpose and the purpose of a life-supporting intent and a peaceful intent, and also with people being trained doing the puja and the mantra meditation and the other remote viewing techniques that we teach, that those folks who come to these receive materials before they come to train them. But then once we're there, that's the chief focus of the entire expedition. Although we do teach other things as well, such as practical protocols of how to set up, the sounds that we send out. We have these tones that we send out into space that have been recorded out of the crop circles that Colin Andrews, who coined the term crop circle, provided to us. And, of course, we also have lasers that we send up into space to serve as a linear vector so they see exactly where we are. But the central technique has to do with the science of consciousness, which, of course, the ancient Vedas and those who understand the secrets of the puja really comprehend. And this is so important because when you look at the history of contact over many societies, over many millennia, it is very much connected to people being in a state of awareness. And the reason for that is that interstellar communication devices, even if they're electronic, interface with coherent thought. And one of the things that we teach is what that means. It's like, if you understand what a laser is coherent light, where all the light waves are synced up as opposed to scattered. Well, coherent thought is when you're in a very deep, centered, calm state of awareness, and then remote view space and remote view where these spacecraft are, and then show them like a laser beam mentally where you're sitting. So if you're sitting at Mount Shasta, you show them exactly where you are and what the group looks like and what the terrain looks like. And this is done mentally through mental imaging, but from a higher state of consciousness of deep cosmic awareness. And so this technique is very, very effective. And some of you who may have read the book Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, which is sort of an autobiography of how I got involved with this. And a lot of people ask, why is an emergency doctor doing this? And it's because when I was 18, I had a contact experience where I was shown and actually co-created with the ETs this technique. And it was made very clear to me that the real science of the next millennium is the science of consciousness. And this is why we're so excited to be able to talk about these things fully on a show like the World Puja Network, because there are so many other shows that want to stick with very materialistic and linear ideas, which are fine. There's a lot of evidence. We have 3,000 cases where these objects have landed and left physical traces. We have thousands of pilot and radar cases where these objects have been tracked on radar. We have now over 500 people in disclosureproject.org who are military and corporate and CIA witnesses who have provided us information on this, and much of it is now out publicly, as you all know. But this is the part of it that really excites me, and that is how we are looking at really the human future by what's happening and evolving right now on these CSETI.org expeditions, because there's so many people from all over the world. In fact, at this particular event, Linda, you might want to remind me, but there were people from Malaysia, New Zealand, there were people from Brazil, Canada, all throughout the United States. It was very, very exciting.
We always have an international group, and it's really fun to meet all the people from everywhere that are of like mind. You know, one thing that I'd like to mention that happens routinely on these expeditions that we take is we have kind of a time distortion that we very often experience, and it usually has to do with when we're in meditation. We're in meditation off and on during the period of 4 or 5 hours that we're sitting out each night, and very often 2 or 3 hours will go by and we'll go like, it seemed like maybe it was 45 minutes, you know. But one really interesting thing is that one of the men that is one of our main still photographers at these expeditions, his name is Emery, he says that since Joshua Tree of last year, he's been taking a photo at the beginning and end of when each meditation starts that Dr. Greer leads us in, and he always sets that photo in the beginning of the meditation to be exposed for 30 seconds. And in a 30-second period, the stars, he has his camera on a tripod, so it's totally still, but the stars move, and as you know, and typically in a 30-second period, the stars might just move a little over a millimeter, which is a very, very tiny bit of movement. But what he started seeing is that in his 30-second exposure at the start of a meditation, he's seeing now almost every training since Joshua Tree, star movement of about 2 centimeters, which would normally take at least half an hour of having the shutter open. And so it's some kind of physical evidence in the camera of the time distortion that we're experiencing while we're there.
Right, and one of the things that people, when you start talking to some of the physicists and scientists that I've met with who are at the CIA and some of the other Department of Defense labs, is that when they've done experiments with high-voltage trans-dimensional energy systems, there is a clear effect that in consciousness but also time and space, and that people who have had very close encounters with these UFOs will often say, oh my God, it seemed like it was 5 minutes or 15 minutes, and later I saw that 2 or 3 hours had gone by. And in fact, that was exactly the experience I had in 1973 when I was up on a mountain in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I had this encounter, and I was up meditating. I'd just done a puja, and I'd learned meditation and had a mantra, and I was sitting up on this mountain at over 5,000 feet up outside of the little town of Boone, North Carolina, and when I was sitting up there, and before I sat to meditate, I saw this silver, beautiful, disc-shaped UFO that appeared. And I had seen ones earlier when I was a child, and I thought, oh, well, they're back. And I just sort of said hello, and it vanished in clear air, crystal clear air before sunset. So I sat to meditate, and I went into a really deep samadhi meditation that was truly transcendent. And of course, in that state, there is no time because you transcend space and time into that quiet state of consciousness. And so by the time I came out of the meditation, it was pitch dark and the stars were all out, and it was stunning. This was in October 1973. And at that point, there had been this sense of timelessness again that goes with this experience of non-local expanded consciousness, which many people, I'm sure listening to this show, have experienced at some point if they meditate. And then I looked up at the sky, and the Milky Way was brilliant overhead. It was crystal clear up at over 5,000 feet. And a thought that wasn't my own was sent to me that said, behold what a beautiful universe God has made. And with that, I went into this sort of cosmic consciousness experience, and I realized there was an ET standing over to my right, and he actually touched me on my right shoulder, and it was this electromagnetic kind of burst, and all the hair on my head stood on end. And I'm making a very long story short, but I ended up sort of dematerializing and appearing on an ET spacecraft where we meditated together. And I realized that these ETs were extremely interested in people experiencing that state of samadhi and that state of pure consciousness, because they knew that that was not only the state from whence a peaceful civilization on Earth can evolve, but also how we would practically learn the sciences of consciousness and these trans-dimensional technologies and use them properly for communication. And so that's how the CSETI contact protocols that we now use, and you can read about these at cseti.org, were developed. And it was a beautiful experience. And what was odd is that when this was over, I just found myself back dematerialized on this gravel road that went up to this fire tower where I had been sitting to meditate on top of what's called Rich's Mountain there in Boone, North Carolina. And I was down the road maybe a quarter of a mile from where I disappeared, and I thought maybe 15 or 20 minutes had gone by. And I had this strange anti-gravity energy around me where I wasn't floating, but where it was almost like levitating. I could bound, and like in one step, I would go 20, 30 feet. I was almost like moonwalking. And it was because I was still slightly trans-dimensionally affected to where this energy field was making me light, very, very physically light. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". And so I came down the mountain and got back down to the little town of Boone, and I thought a nuclear war had happened because everything was shuttered up and it was deserted and no one was out. And I went, what in the world? And it turned out I thought it should be about 9 o'clock because that time of year is usually dark at 7:30 or what have you, and it was actually almost midnight or around midnight. I thought, what in the world happened to these 3 hours? And it was just an amazing experience. Now, at the time, of course, I'm 18 years old, and I certainly don't understand transdimensional astrophysics, and I certainly don't understand this what Linda's just discussing with this connection between this experience in consciousness and meditation and this sort of time-space alteration that occurs. But that's what I experienced, and I understand it now. But at the time, it was just completely mystifying to me. And if you read the accounts of people who've had contact with ETs, many people will recount that. And every one of us experienced that while we were at Mount Shasta, this sort of experience of time vanishing, because we were in the state of timelessness, and having an energy field around us where I think you might recall one night, Linda, we were there, and it was as if we were sitting in a full moon. Now, it was a moonless night, pitch black, and we're in in the woods and in a field outside of Mount Shasta. No artificial lights around, none. And suddenly, it went from that to as if someone had turned a light switch off.
That's right.
And we all, and everyone sitting there, this was not somebody's subtle perception or intuition. Everyone experienced this. And it was clear that we had been in this sort of etheric, transdimensional, interstellar energy. And everyone noticed it. And when it vanished, it was palpable and very visible to everybody.
We've experienced that before, and it's always really striking when it happens. It's totally like somebody flips a light switch.
Well, speaking of Joshua Tree, which is where we're going in about a month and a half up to Joshua Tree National Park, amazing contact has happened there. We'll get to in a moment. That's where, I forget what year it was, we were sitting out on this high plain where Linda and I and several people in 96 saw this massive teal, blue, green, sort of Hershey-Kissy-shaped craft that came straight out of the sky and went straight into the ground. So brilliant it lit up the whole desert, and scintillating, brilliant, beautiful light. But it was shaped like it was flat on the bottom and then went up to sort of a top like a Hershey's Kiss. And we saw where it entered the ground, and so we started going to this spot because I felt they were showing us where they had some underground activity or base there in the Joshua Tree area. And so we've been going there ever since, and what happened is that we were sitting at that spot one year after this event, after this landing event happened. And by the way, there were about 15 people who saw this. I mean, it was very brilliant. Anyone looking in the right direction. It happened very quickly, but it was very, very fully manifest.
It was huge. It
was huge. Yeah, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 inches at arm's length, which is, if you look at a jet in this night sky, it's maybe a teeny fraction of an inch. I mean, this was massive, and not that far away, about half a mile away from where we were, and so, which is like 3,000 feet. So what happened is that we were sitting in circle at that spot one year, and it was, again, a moonless night, crystal clear, just like at Mount Shasta a couple weeks ago. And we all realized that we were sitting in some kind of a cone of light. So bright, it was like a full moon, like you could read by.
You could see your shadows.
Yes, you could see your shadows, everything. And I realized it was coming from the sector of Sirius and Orion.
Right.
Which we'll get to this in a minute. And I as soon as I pointed that out to people, the ETs turned it off just to make it clear that it was real. And it went from seeming like full moon, sort of silvery, astral, gorgeous light that you could see shadows from, to complete darkness. And it's like, oh my God, and everyone saw that also. So some of these things that happen are so amazing, and they're associated with these transdimensional experiences, where there is exactly what Linda was talking about and what Emery noted, and that is this alteration in space and time that happens where we'll be in a meditation that's, it feels like it's been 20 minutes and it's been an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Right.
And it just vanishes, and it's an amazing state of consciousness. And there's such power when you have 30 or 40 people doing this in that state of mind and that level of coherence. And that's why the ETs come. A lot of people say, how is it that every single one of these expeditions you get these photographs and these amazing things? I say it's because it's not that we're special, but what we're doing is special. I tell people it's because people are actually in the state of mind of not only being peaceful and nonviolent, but also in this higher state of consciousness, understanding that if you're going faster than the speed of light, and your civilization is living in that paradigm, which any civilization visiting Earth that's come from another star system is, that all of their sciences and technologies cross these dimensions into the worlds of thought and astral forms and faster than the speed of light travel, but also communication. And with that comes a profound understanding of the structure of consciousness and the nature of consciousness in its universal aspect. And it's interesting because it not only has an operational aspect in terms of remote viewing and coherent thought sequencing where we see the craft and show them where we are and kind of zoom them in with this clear laser-like thinking, but it has a very important philosophical component. That is, on this planet, people kill each other because they're a different race or a different tribe or a different religion or what have you. And in order for us to deal with the diversity of life forms that are out in the cosmos, we're going to have to see that at the core, everyone's awake, and there's a singularity of that mind, and that's really the foundation of universal peace. The foundation of universal peace, not only on Earth but amongst the stars, is universal consciousness. And so it's fundamentally a spiritual process.
When you're in that state of consciousness, too, out in the field, your senses are heightened, and particularly your vision. It's incredible the things you see that are all around you, probably, other times, too, that you're not even aware of it. We saw so many astral beings. Right. I mean, crowds and crowds of ETs, and you can sense the difference between the ETs, the celestials, the Native American spirits. It was just crowded with them.
Well, and Emery, our photographer, who has a really excellent digital camera, no flash being used. So these are not, flash bulb things lighting up bits of dust. There's no flash, and there are these brilliant craft and objects and beings in these photographs. Right. And this is what we're getting. And he's actually been excellent because it's like when Raven, who if you go to cseti.org, you'll see a photograph of this extraterrestrial who we're quite convinced is from the Andromeda galaxy system. It's the closest galaxy to the Milky Way. It's about 2.5 million light years from here. And she took this picture and had the camera, no flash, took a picture, and here is this man hovering right outside the circle quite clearly. And he's there transdimensionally. And people say, well, what is that? I said, well, you could probably walk straight through him, but it flashed in, and there's an orb over to the left that is sort of like a transdimensional projector. There's this cone of light coming from it, and in that cone of light is standing, or floating actually, this, what I estimate to be a 4 to 5 foot tall ET being. And I will say this, I didn't take the picture, but it's the most important photograph ever taken in the history of this subject. There's no question, because it was a diplomatic emissary from another star system there as we invited them to come, who chose to flash in like that and actually be photographed by a CSETI, what we call Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind, which is a diplomatic contact team. And that's amazing, and it is absolutely legit. And Raven, when she took it, though, told me that what she had started doing beginning earlier in 2009, about a year ago, was that she went into this state of consciousness where she asked the ETs if they would use her mind and her camera and her hands to be able to know where to point and when to click. Because when you're dealing with transdimensional systems, they don't always fully materialize the way a 747 does, or the way. And what's interesting is that they're doing this and cooperating. Well, it turns out Emery's doing the same thing. So there's this connection between higher states of consciousness, remote viewing, and this cooperative dialogue in consciousness and thought with these ETs, and the photography that's happening and the imaging. Now, some people have asked, well, why don't they just fully materialize and land there? I said, well, we've had them fully materialize, and we have some amazing images. The problem with that is that every time something like that has happened, within minutes, we have some sort of military jet or aircraft come in, sometimes 200 or 300 feet above ground level, shining lights and swooping in on us. So, the ETs are certainly aware that the world is an armed camp right now, and the military projects that deal with UFOs are not happy at all with what we're doing, because we're basically taking matters into our own hands. And back in 1992, I had the head of Army Intelligence. He basically said, just what the hell do you think you're doing? And I said, well, we're all free citizens of the universe, and this is what we're doing. And he was appalled, actually, and did not like it at all, because he felt that we were stepping into an area that they wanted to control through warfare and through SDI, Star Wars, and things of this sort. So CSETI is the lead diplomatic vanguard, and in fact, there's a G7 country that's asking us to model this for them, and has recently sent representatives to some of these expeditions we've done this year to observe what we're doing, and are very favorably impressed. We just heard from a senior intelligence official with one of these governments who had come to an event in the last year. I'm not at liberty to say which one, but who is very excited about what we're doing and completely understands it. So the other part of what we're doing, and that people are doing when they come to these CSETI events, like Mount Shasta or what we're going to be doing at Joshua Tree in November, is that they're actually creating the morphogenic field for the governments of the world to eventually accept this and to do something positive and peaceful, rather than just denying it and suppressing the information, or worse, which is what's happening with these really classified programs, using advanced weapon systems to target these extraterrestrial vehicles. And I think that it's very important for folks to understand that if people do nothing in that vacuum, some really bad actors can step. And this is what we saw with Nazi Germany, and this is what we've seen in other times in human history. So it's very important for people to step up and do this. And it has an effect, I think, beyond what we can measure and know. But if you start doing it, you're never going to regret it, because it's so beautiful. And a lot of people say, oh, gosh, isn't it scary when something kind of flashes in like that or appears I said, oh, no, we're all so excited, we're thrilled. And because it's completely beautiful, totally beautiful.
Delightful. Incredible.
So, Linda, you have some notes on some other things that happened this past 2 weeks ago at Mount Shasta. You want to share?
Yeah, well, one really exciting thing that happened is many of you on World Puja have heard the story of when we were in Crestone, Colorado back in June, and a crystal was placed at Dr. Greer's spot in the circle the first night we went out to our field site. Well, a similar thing happened at Mount Shasta this year. There's an old favorite site that we have gone to ever since 1999 that actually Dr. Greer found it intuitively. It's really a hidden, secluded place. And we were not allowed to go there this year, and it's actually getting quite overgrown with trees. And the views are a little bit obscured, and there was some forestry equipment in there this year. But we went out one afternoon to take a look at it, and a couple of our teammates had gone out earlier that day, and they went, and there's like a flat rock where Dr. Greer always puts his chair right in front of it, and that's where we form our circle. And sitting there was this pristine, clean, beautiful piece of quartz crystal right in Dr. Greer's spot. And this is a real loose, volcanic, sandy, dusty kind of place where there's been forestry equipment, growling around, and yet a new gift from the ETs was right there waiting for him.
Yeah, it was amazing, because some people on our team had gone there and just to look at the site, and it was sitting right at that spot, and it was absolutely clean and pristine, and no one had been there, and it's a very secluded area. And someone said it looked like what they call a Lemurian crystal, that is, in other words, from the Lemurian continent. And there's some, in the mythology of Mount Shasta, there's the idea that there is sort of a transdimensional and hidden city in Mount Shasta that's the remnants of Lemuria, a continent which had existed eons ago in the Pacific area. And I know that, in fact, such a continent did exist, and there was very advanced civilization there that did have contact with ETs, but it could have been, of course, millions and millions of years ago. People forget that the Earth has been around for a few billion years, and there's been life on Earth for hundreds of millions of years, and that what we have in the so-called recorded history is a teeny fraction of the history of intelligent life on this planet. And this gets into this whole concept of sort of forbidden archaeology and the ancient civilizations that may have existed, the remnants of which are some of the mysterious things like the Nazca lines and the pyramids and the giant obelisks and things of this sort. But clearly there's some connection with Mount Shasta and that ancient Lemurian world, but also with an ongoing presence, sort of a spaceport or transdimensional entry area at Mount Shasta with the ETs, because we've had so many astonishing things happen there. And this was just sort of one little example of it, sort of a little gift that happened that's rather mysterious and inexplicable, to be honest, except that, of course, we understand how dematerialization and rematerialization happen. So it's not, in a sense, that astonishing, except it's beautiful nevertheless when it does happen. And one of the things that happened that was really beautiful is that we had so many actual materialized spacecraft that appeared in the skies around us that we were able to film, and also these beautiful God consciousness lit ships that would come from Mount Shasta up in areas that were completely vertical, way up on the edge of the glaciers up there. And we filmed these. I mean, these would come out and they would then signal to us. And so we would signal to them and they would signal back, and then there would be a transdimensional presence in the field around us of these sort of energy forms moving. And we had these detectors. We have a magnetic field detector that went completely off the scale when this happened, which measures the magnetic field shift when one of these transdimensional ships or being is moving in. And we have another device that's a storm tracker, but basically it's supposed to pick up lightning bolt strikes. Of course, it was crystal clear. There was no lightning within hundreds of miles, but it would go off. And it kept going off as if this was getting closer and closer and closer and closer. In fact, it was, while we were having this contact happen. And I think there were more than one camera that actually were able to film these objects, these beautiful, it's hard to describe, they're almost like diamond white objects that emerge from Mount Shasta and then intelligently signal and interact with us. And it was beautiful, and luckily everyone got to see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't miss it, and we definitely got it on film. It was quite amazing. And, another thing that happened more so on this training than on others, although it has been happening, is with our radar detectors.
Right.
How they've been, going off in response to the ETs affecting their circuitry and interacting with them. But lately, and on this training, we had radar detectors going off when they were not only turned off, but when their batteries had been removed.
Yeah, and this is remarkable. I mean, for those of you who haven't heard this show before, we have these electronic detectors. I mean, you can get them at Radio Shack or anything, that are often used for, picking up police radar and what have you. But they have a laser band and X band and K band and what have you. And we'll be out in the middle of a wilderness area, and suddenly we will have them begin to go off. It used to be it was rare that this happened, but since Joshua Tree in 2007, about 2.5, 3 years ago, we had a 23-minute lock-on to a big interstellar center out in Orion, and this is when it all started. And in the last 2 years or so, 1.5 to 2 years, almost all of these expeditions have had this sort of transdimensional electronic contact that has been going on, where they literally, it isn't like a beam of energy going through space to the detector. It's coming from what I call within space into the circuitry, and they then actually converse. It's like an electronic version of conversation. It's very, very bizarre, but it's fascinating. And to have these things do this even when batteries have been taken off and they've been turned off, is almost unbelievable. And you go, oh my God, it gets strange. You can't imagine. It's strange, and then it gets even stranger.
And then there's your compass that has been demagnetized 180 degrees off since the beginning of July when we were in France, and it stayed that way. That's right.
Absolutely. And that's something that, of course, we mentioned on a previous show, but for those of you who weren't listening, we had an contact experience when we were in France this past July, about 2 months ago, I guess now, and we were, I noticed afterwards that the compass I had was literally 180 degrees demagnetized off magnetic north. Now, this is not something that is just, this is not possible to do with just, something sitting around. I mean, for you to cause magnetic north to shift 180 degrees on a compass, and this is a compass that, to my knowledge, is still that way because it was still that way at Mount Shasta. But we also had magnetic field fluxes that were being picked up by these meters and other compasses. For a while there, I had another compass that did this that was, given to me in England because my compass was not functioning properly. And it shifted about 90 degrees off magnetic north, which is an amazing sort of thing to happen. So we have a lot of electromagnetic phenomenon that confirms these other sorts of experiences, and it gets into it. To understand it properly, you have to understand the nature of the extraterrestrial technologies that cross faster than the speed of light, what I call the crossing point of light, and back again, and interacts with our environment in ways that are very unconventional. And by unconventional, imagine having an electronic device with none of the with no batteries in it, and it's electronically going off. Well, this isn't supposed to be possible, but we all witnessed it. So, when you see these sort of things happening and you put it together with the images and the photos and the this and the that, it begins to be this compelling evidence that we're in an ascendancy where the veils are dropping and where the likelihood of very increased, open, undeniable contact is going to be unveiled. And this is evolving very, very rapidly in the last 2 years, certainly in the last 2 years. So that's what's really exciting about the time we live in right now. And we all know that, this whole period of corruption and secrecy is going to collapse. And with it, then will be the unveiling of not only the fact that we're not alone in the universe, but the forbidden knowledges of consciousness. All the different traditions in the science of consciousness will be liberated. There'll be a whole new view of spirituality, but also there'll be these wondrous technologies that pull energy out of the fabric of space-time, which is what we're doing with the OrionProject.org, is to identify scientists and attempt to put the funding together to build a laboratory and a research facility here near the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where we can combine the most brilliant minds we've identified from all over the world and work on these sort of sciences and technologies, because we have confirmed that they exist and that they work. You've got to then get it out of the secret laboratories, and that's what we're working to do, is to be the bridge that kind of moves through this veil of secrecy and brings these out, because this is an issue that isn't only about contact with ETs. I mean, what good does it do if we make contact with ETs but we destroy Gaia by burning fossil fuels forever? And one of the parts of this project that a lot of people need to understand is that the technologies that permit any interstellar civilization to go transdimensional faster than the speed of light is the same area of science and technology that would allow you to have a generator pulling energy out of the space around it. So it would look like a heat pump, but it would be a generator running your house for free energy, no pollution, and pulling it out of the fabric of space-time. Same thing for propulsion. I mean, these things, people say, I saw a UFO, and it was floating, and it was silent, and it zipped here, and then it disappeared there and reappeared there. Very true. How is it doing that? It was not burning, it certainly isn't using Exxon Jet A fuel, and it's not using a solid rocket booster. It's using these types of electromagnetic, transdimensional, hyperdimensional physics that the OrionProject.org, if you go to that website, you'll see that's what we're focusing on. And what it means is that when this information can come out to our planet, it means that we will be able in a generation to eliminate poverty as we know it on this planet and to completely stop the environmental destruction of the planet. Because when the energy becomes free, you can recycle 100% of everything that you use. There would be no waste. You can do 100% free energy. So it means there's no pollution from your energy generating sources. And there'd be such abundance, you can eliminate poverty. A lot of people don't realize that 40% of the population of the world does not have literally plumbing. They don't have a pot to pee in, as we say. And that's 2.8 billion residents of Earth. And a lot of people in the West and America and Europe and perhaps Japan and other countries really don't appreciate the level of poverty that exists in these other parts of the world. And it exists not because there's any lack of knowledge or even lack of abundance. It's the corruption that goes with the current macroeconomic fossil fuel centralized energy petrodollar system. And that's something that's why this information is all secret and has been secret for 50 to 100 years. So part of the project is also, when we do these expeditions, is that we do a group meditation where we have, and we do this every night, where we have 30, 40 people doing a meditation for the healing of the earth and the guidance of the people of the earth and the leaders of the earth to let these the veils come down and to let these secrets be known and to let these wondrous new sciences that could transform life on Earth come forward as they should have in the last 100 years. And the reason they're not coming forward at this point is because people are afraid to take on these very powerful interests. But that's why I keep emphasizing a lot of what we're doing has to do with having the courage to do it. It's not just having the knowledge. You have to have the courage. It's one thing to know. It's another thing to do anything about it. And so this is where people can get involved in not only making contact with the ETs directly, but also in creating a clear path scientifically into a new energy future and a macroeconomic system that's guided by conscious spiritual principles that doesn't have to require 40% of the world to be living in, horrible poverty. So other events from this past week, I know we've gotten off on some other subjects, but...
Well, one thing that's been happening more and more also is we've been hearing voices, usually male voices, sometimes female, but definite male voices speaking. And on this particular, it started mostly at Joshua Tree last year, and even the day before when we were at Irvine, California, we had a definite male voice that bleeped into the middle of our circle, just sort of in disembodied voice in midair.
Right.
And then we had a couple of voices, whispered voices, and you heard a distinct voice repeating to you in Joshua Tree, and then you and Emery both heard a male voice at Mount Shasta this year too.
Yeah, these were audible. And what's interesting is that you're in thin air, and then there's this ET being that's sort of dematerialized there, but then speaks, and you're going, if you just heard it by yourself, you thought, oh my God, I'm losing my mind, but you're not. And this is something which has happened increasingly in the last, and you're right, Linda, since October of 2009, in the last 11 months, when we first had this happen at the Irvine training in Orange County. And it was then after that we went up to Joshua Tree National Park, where we'll be this year, again in November. And there was that's when we got this image of this extraterrestrial being hovering right outside our circle. And I have a feeling it was that being that we heard, frankly, or his group. And because there were several. There were, in fact, when we were at Joshua Tree, just moments before Raven took that photograph, a large number of people in our group heard a group of 3 or 4 ETs speaking. And most people heard mostly female voices then. And it was often an area outside the circle where I have night vision scopes that are very, very advanced ones, and there was nothing there, no humans there, I should say. And I heard within the voices a male voice, not speaking English or anything I could understand. And then it was shortly after that I said, look, we have to get back in circle. We were sort of on a break. And that's when Raven took this picture. That's up at cseti.org, cseti.org, which is remarkable. And then, so then this year at Shasta, this happened, as Linda mentioned, multiple times. And the other thing that happens, we went up to a place up, I guess it's about 7,000 feet up on the mountain, on Mount Shasta. And it was very cold that night. It got down to like 25 degrees. So, I mean, the group was really, really troopers to be up there at that temperature. But we were sitting in circle doing this deep meditation in cosmic consciousness, and there was this gorgeous series of chimes, electronic tones that were sent. And I had been talking about the Vedic, in the pujas and in the Vedic tradition, the concept of name and form, where a certain tonality can manifest etheric and astral energy and materialize an object. And what we had was an ET civilization send these beautiful chime-like tones that a whole lot of people heard, and they literally emanated from right in front of Dr. Bravo, and she was sitting just immediately to my right in the circle. And people halfway across the circle and everywhere heard this, and it was beautiful. And we have to examine our recorders to see if anyone actually got it on their audio recorders. We may have, but again, people talk about the kinds of ways that ETs will make contact, and it isn't all just a craft floating across the sky. It's all these other amazing sorts of experiences that happen at every single one of these expeditions under the stars. And if anything, those things are in a way more astonishing than when a craft comes in.
Well, and it was earlier that same week that Ed and Emery, who were staying on the same property but in different buildings, heard the same type of chiming tone in their respective rooms one morning.
That's right. Exactly.
Yep. So the chiming has actually, I've heard doorbell sounds.
Yeah, and actually Trudy had that happen this year. One member of our team who's been with us for many years was at the Outer Banks of North Carolina and heard the same sort of beautiful tone in her room. And it happened twice, in fact. So these there's tonality, there's light, there's consciousness, and there's the materialization of craft and things that are seen. And I think that this is really quite exciting.
And people were touched also by, whenever you're touched by an ET being, you could swear it was a human doing it because it's a very palpable touch in varying degrees. Like at Boca Grande back in February, I was literally practically slugged in the arm, and to the point that I spun around because I thought it was kind of rude of someone to try to get my attention. They could just give me a tap. It would have been nicer, and there was no one there.
Right. So that's another phenomenon is people are physically touched at times, and there are all kinds of ways. And of course, we did have actual ETs materialize in the field physically in the field around us.
People saw actual people.
Yeah, actual ET beings, and they would appear and then vanish. There were, with a group of 40 people that are new people being trained, they tend to be, I don't know if the correct word is shy, but reticent to be too demonstrative. And I think that it has to do with not only our readiness, but their readiness and whether it would be appropriate. But I think that that's happening increasingly also because it also happened in France. Where we had, 4 to 5 of these beings that appeared in the field when I was walking out past the puja table. And you could actually hear them as the whole group, there were like 60 people there, coming in behind me, and they kind of scurried off. They were like, oh, my God, there's so many people coming. But they were very, very shy. In fact, I was told that they were shy ones that were observing but weren't ready to, be there with 60 people.
And we heard their voices, too.
The other thing we've noticed is that a lot of the things that happen at these events have to do with the readiness of the group collectively, but also individually. And the ETs, as opposed to the stuff that goes on in the military world of hoaxing abductions and hoaxing mutilations and all this stuff, that's all man-made stuff. And but the actual ET presence is very gentle and psychically very nonviolent. So they don't want to create fear. And if they sense that someone would be frightened if they went too far in this sort of strange phenomenon or materializing, they won't do it. One year we were at Joshua Tree. It wasn't a few years ago, I guess. And
there's 7. Yeah,
it was in the last 3 or 4 years, and we were sitting in circle at this site, and we were in this really deep meditation, and I was guiding this meditation into cosmic consciousness and God consciousness and remote viewing, and the group was extremely coherent, very coherent, which is what the ETs are looking for, is that kind of massive coherence and orderliness. But there was a member of the team, and it's a wonderful man, but who's had a lot of anxiety problems in his childhood and what have you. And the ETs very compassionately checked in with him and mentally asked, and he heard this thought that said, would it be okay if we totally materialized? And he said, and is the group ready? They were deflecting it away from him and just said, is the group ready? And he says, oh, yes, I think we are. And at that instant, as soon as he answered back, an extraterrestrial vehicle fully materialized about 15 feet above us to the east of us over the landing area where this big teal blue ship had landed at Joshua Tree back in 96. But this was like just 3 years ago or so. And this craft came over, and it came over the sort of the south end of the group going from east to west. And if I had stood up on my chair and jumped, I think I could have touched the underside of it. And it wasn't lit up. It was non-illuminated. And it wasn't that large. I'd say 20 feet across. And it floated across making the weirdest sound. Everyone who heard this sound will never forget it because it almost sounded like a didgeridoo, but it was going and it got just to the west of the circle, very low, 15 feet above us, and dematerialized in thin air. And so everyone was going, oh, my God. But, of course, when this person on our team shared how it unfolded, it was clear that the ETs were concerned that if they did that without some warning to him, he might have jumped out of his skin, and so they're very compassionate. This is one thing I always point out to people. Everyone's, in the public, often when I give a public talk, I'll be, oh, aren't you afraid of this? And I say, oh, no. I'd be worried what humans might do to us. I mean, I've had death threats and assassination attempts and everything else. But the ETs, not a problem. And they're very, very gentle. And they never push the experience beyond what the group as a whole, but also the individuals in the group are ready for, which is a sign of great enlightenment because it's compassionate. It's like the compassion of the Buddha. And so it's a beautiful experience all the way around. So I encourage people, if they're so motivated and feel ready for it, to join us on these expeditions. We're going to, again, be in Joshua Tree National Park, doing this in this November from the 7th to the 13th. And you can find out about that or register if you want to come at the cseti.org. And if you want more information and some of the materials, this new book that has a lot of these accounts that comes with a DVD that comes with the book called Contact Countdown to Transformation. You can get that at disclosureproject.org. And if you're interested in the Energy Research Project, the orionproject.org. So those are all the places you can go to find out about what we're working on. So, well, I believe our time is about up, and I'd like to thank Linda for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to thank the wonderful folks at the World Puja Network for allowing us this time to share our experiences and our perspective on this subject. And until next time, this is Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and keep looking up. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.